On to other stories today and focusing on Spain for a moment as the Nato summit kicks off in The Hague. Spain is being seen as the alliance's new problem nation. This is after attempting to avoid the 5% defense spending target. The Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez insists that Madrid will only need to spend 2.1% of GDP to achieve the newly set NATO targets. We have joining us this morning Dan Lacalle, chief economist at Treses. Then such an interesting comment from Pedro Sánchez, because we are talking about one of the fastest growing economies in Europe right now. And yet he is the prime minister telling the rest of NATO that they can't spend more on defense.
Hi, Sylvia. It makes absolutely no sense. The situation in the Spanish defense system is absolutely dire. Spain is only spending about 0.9% of GDP. The infrastructure, the situation of the military, of security forces is very, very weak. And it's not because of lack of expenditure, because the government has the highest expenditure that any government has had in democratic times in real terms. Furthermore, it's receiving the highest figure of European funds. Therefore, it makes no sense to say that Spain can only spend 2.1% on defense. Furthermore, because there are ample studies around Spain about the inefficiencies of that expenditure. If Spain actually tackled the enormous inefficiencies and duplicate spending that exist within the budget, it would have ample room, more than 70 billion a year, in order to address the very, very urgent situation of defense expenditure. The level of security in Spain is very weak. Spain needs to do something, and it cannot just simply, because of tactical political reasons, go out and create a problem in NATO in an absolutely urgent moment for the alliance.
I'm also wondering here whether to some extent the Spanish government is shooting itself in the foot from the point of view that there's a lot of bullishness out there in terms of the economies that are spending a lot on defense, because ultimately that also brings economic activity, further economic activity. What do you think is the key driver for the Spanish economy going forward? For instance, if we see a slowdown in tourism, then what is the alternative for Spain?
You are absolutely right. Defense spending is critical to enhance productivity, to bring more innovation, to generate more jobs and more investment in technology. Everybody understands this. It's in the Draghi report, it's in the Letta report. The position of the Spanish government makes no sense, particularly because the headline figures of growth of the Spanish economy come with more negative elements behind them when you look, for example, at GDP per capita. GDP per capita is stagnant. The level of unemployment in official terms is already the highest in the European Union, but we have to remember that there's about 1.1 million furloughed jobs that are not taken into account in the unemployment figures. So effective unemployment in Spain is much higher. In fact, it has not improved since 2019, and private investment has not yet recovered from the levels of 2019. And I'm very worried about foreign investment. Foreign investment has declined in the first 3 months of the year to the lowest level since 2020. So you cannot basically continue to make the mistake that Spain made in 2007, 2008, which is to believe that tourism, immigration, and government spending plus EU funds are going to keep the economy moving. Defense spending is a critical factor, and I come back to the point. There is ample room in the budget to accommodate for added levels of expenditure in defense if they tackle the inefficiencies.
Also worth reminding our viewers that some of the COVID funds that Spain has been receiving, they're coming to an end next year. So that could also bring some economic pressures there. But I'm wondering, what is the risk that the politics at this stage pose for the economy? A lot of speculation about what's going to happen in terms of the corruption scandal that involves the party of the prime minister. To what extent is that a concern for you?
I think it is a very big concern. The number of scandals are piling up around government and around the party of the Prime Minister, the Socialist Party. All those are certainly creating two very significant elements of uncertainty. The first one is the very fragile coalition that keeps him in power. That fragile coalition is now demanding a lot more spending for their own interests and therefore creating further instability in terms of economic and budgeting processes. In the other area that we need to think about it is that for political, tactical reasons, many people fear that the Prime Minister is going to use the challenges of Nato, the challenges with Israel, diplomatic issues to try to hide or at least divert attention from the corruption scandals. So all those elements are certainly there, and it does not help in a summit that is absolutely critical for Europe and would be essential for Spain.
And then I'd just like to pivot for a moment to banking, because the news yesterday in terms of the potential merger between BBVA and Sabadell, I'm just wondering, what are your interpretations from this story? The fact that they might not be able to merge for at least 3 years. What does that tell you in terms of the outlook for the banking union and the capital markets union when you think about also UniCredit?
Yes, Sylvia, we have discussed numerous times in this program how important it is to have a strong and resilient banking system all over Europe. It makes absolutely no sense to approve the bid for Sabadell by the government with conditions that basically mean that they cannot merge. They cannot merge, not even in the period of time that the government is saying. It also explains in the ruling that they might extend that process in which those two banks cannot merge. Why would you allow a merger if you don't let the two banks merge? Furthermore, if we don't pay attention to the challenges of the banking system in Europe, which remains significant, but we also have to take into account that the banking system has done an admirable job. If we don't pay attention to that, then we're going to have trouble in the future.
Dan, always great to speak with you. We appreciate your time today. Dan Lacalle, Chief Economist at Tresses.